Heave on the larboard sheet. Watch the pilings to starboard. Steady as she goes.
You're 16 days out of Bristol, riding the tail of a fair wind into Boston Harbour, July of 1726. The sun is up, the gulls are screaming. Your captain is already counting his cut of the molasses below deck. This is the easy part of the voyage. The part where nothing goes wrong. Then the wind shifts. You smell it before you see it. Not fish, not bilge, not the usual harbour stew of tar and rope and sailor sweat. This is something else. Sweet underneath, rotten on top, with an oily metallic finish that climbs up the back of your throat and settles there like a coin under your tongue. It's a butcher shop left in the sun for a week, basted in hot pine pitch, then sprayed down with bird droppings for good measure. The cabin boy gets to the lee rail just in time. The bosun doesn't. Nobody laughs. You look up. The mainsail blocks your view for one more merciful second. Then the ship comes about, and there it is. A bare rock in the middle of the channel, no bigger than a tavern floor. Nix's mate, the locals call it. On top of the rock stands a wooden frame, maybe 20 feet tall, weather-greyed and slick with seabird filth. Hanging from the frame, swaying just slightly in the breeze you're now wishing would stop, is an iron cage shaped roughly like a man. Inside the cage is what used to be one. His name was William Fly. 8 days ago, he was a mutineer with a working pulse. 6 days ago, he was hanged at Boston's Long Wharf. Not for the murder he committed, but for refusing to repent for it. Then they cut him down, stripped him, dipped him in boiling pine tar until his hair singed and his skin went the colour of an old saddle, fitted him into a blacksmith's bespoke iron suit, and hoisted him out here, so that you, sailor, on this very deck, on this very morning, would have to sail past him to get paid. His left eye socket is empty. The gulls got there first. They always do. Welcome to Boston. Now here's the part the storybooks won't tell you. This rotting thing in the cage isn't an accident. It isn't medieval barbarism left over from a less enlightened age. It is, in 1726, cutting-edge British policy. The most powerful empire on earth ordered this, paid for this, filed paperwork on this. A blacksmith earned more for building this cage than a Royal Navy seaman earned in 3 months at sea. There are signatures, in ink, in a courtroom in London, that put this corpse exactly where it is. They want you to see it. They timed it for you. So forget the Disney pirate. Forget the rum-soaked rogue with the cocked hat and the cocky grin. Forget the noble outlaw shouting last words from the gallows. The Crown didn't want a martyr. The Crown wanted a billboard. They built it out of a man. A picture is worth 1,000 words. A corpse in a cage, in summer, downwind of a major American port, is worth about 1,000 pirates who decide to become honest cod fishermen instead. Over the next 40 minutes, I'm going to take you through it in 5 layers, each one worse than the last. The sentence, the drop, the tar, the cage, and the long, slow, screaming forensic theatre of a human body unmaking itself in salt air for the entertainment of every captain who came after. By the end, you'll understand exactly why the British did this. And you might wish you didn't. Before the cage, before the tar, before the gulls, there was a courtroom. To understand why William Fly ended up swinging over Boston Harbour in a custom iron suit, you have to step backward into the machinery that put him there. And the British, bless them, kept beautiful records. A pirate did not get tried like a regular criminal. Murder somebody on Cheapside, you went to the Old Bailey. Murder somebody on the open ocean, even somebody you didn't like, and you went to a different building entirely, the High Court of Admiralty. A silver oar, 18 inches long, sat on the judge's bench. That oar was the court's jurisdiction made physical. It said, "We own the water. Everything that happens on salt water answers to us." The charge was already written in Latin, which is impressive when you remember most of the accused couldn't read it. Hostis humani generis, enemy of all mankind. not a citizen who broke a law. A category of human the law had decided to delete. No benefit of clergy, no appeal, no mercy on grounds of insanity, drunkenness, or having a really good lawyer because you didn't get a lawyer. If 12 men in a panelled room said you were a pirate, you were a pirate. The only question left was logistics. Take Captain William Kidd, May 23rd, 1701, Newgate Prison, London. Kidd spent his last morning, where every condemned man spent it in the prison chapel, listening to the Ordinary of Newgate deliver a sermon about hellfire, while an empty coffin sat in the middle aisle as a visual aid. Then they put him in an open cart, hands bound in front, and they gave him rum. This is real, and it tells you everything. The British state, the same state about to kill him, issued the condemned a free allowance of liquor on his ride to the gallows. Officially, this was mercy. Unofficially, it was crowd control. A drunk pirate doesn't make a defiant speech. A drunk pirate slumps. The Crown understood public relations 3 centuries before Madison Avenue did. The cart rolled east through London, past the Tower, past the docks, past crowds who'd paid for window seats in taverns. Along the route, 2p for a view, 6p with a pint. They threw things, sometimes flowers, mostly not. Kidd was so drunk, by the time the cart reached the river, he had to be held upright by 2 marshals. His destination was Execution Dock at Wapping, a muddy patch of foreshore on the north bank of the Thames, chosen for one reason. It sat at the low water mark. Admiralty jurisdiction ended exactly where the tide ended. So they killed you in the mud, in the river's own dining room, on the boundary between solid ground and salt water. Symbolism in the British Empire was never accidental. The gallows at Wapping were short, deliberately so. This is the part the movies never show you because they don't have the stomach for it. In 1701, nobody had invented the long drop yet. William Marwood wouldn't work out his calculated fall tables until the 1870s. A modern judicial hanging breaks the 2nd and 3rd cervical vertebrae and shuts the brain off in roughly a heartbeat. The short drop did no such thing. The condemned stepped off a cart or a ladder. He fell maybe 12 to 18 inches. The hyoid bone, that delicate U-shaped bone in your throat, did not snap. The neck did not break. What happened instead was slower and much worse. The rope crushed the trachea. The rope occluded the carotid arteries on both sides of the neck. Oxygen-rich blood stopped reaching the brain. Carbon dioxide-rich blood backed up in the face. Consciousness, depending on body weight and rope placement, persisted somewhere between 15 seconds and a full agonizing minute. The body fought it the entire way down. The legs kicked in violent rhythmic spasms. The crowd called this the marshal's dance, because the legs moved like a dance master was still calling steps. It wasn't dancing. It was the spinal cord firing off its last commands, while the brain it served suffocated above it. Cardiac arrest took 10 to 20 minutes. The face told the rest. Tongue protruded, dark and swollen. Eyes bulged, the white speckled red with conjunctival hemorrhages where capillaries had burst under pressure. Skin gone, the deep purple blue of cyanosis. Tiny pinprick dots, petechiae, peppered the cheeks and forehead. Bladder voided, bowels voided. And in some cases, owing to spinal compression in the lumbar region, a partial post-mortem erection, a phenomenon the executioners called angel lust, with the dry, ugly humour of men who saw it every day. Captain Kidd got it twice. The first rope broke. He fell into the Thames mud, still half alive, and they had to haul him up by the armpits while he gurgled. They got another rope. They strung him up again. The second one held. The crowd cheered both times. Now here's where Admiralty law did something most landsmen never knew about. The body did not come down. Not yet. There was a custom called the 3 tides rule. The corpse had to hang at Execution Dock until 3 tides had washed over it. Roughly 36 hours. The Thames would rise, submerge the dangling body up to the chest, and then retreat, leaving him cold and dripping and bloated and on display for the next cycle, 3 times. The official rationale was ritual cleansing water reclaiming what water had jurisdiction over. The practical rationale was simpler. 36 hours was enough time for a man's face to stop looking like a man's face. In the Royal Navy's accounting, 3 tides was the difference between an execution and a public service announcement. While we're here, let me kill one of the dumber myths you've been sold. The defiant gallows speech. Every pop history book has Kid, or Blackbeard, or somebody delivering an immortal final monologue from the rope. You've read those speeches. They're beautifully written. They are also, almost without exception, complete fiction. Printers in London had pamphlets ready to sell before the body stopped twitching. They wrote the speeches the night before. The condemned, in real life, were too drunk, too terrified, or too far into asphyxiation to say anything coherent. What the crowd actually heard, more often than not, was a wet rattle. History sells better with last words. Reality sells out by noon. So now the tides have come and gone 3 times. Kid is down, the mud is washed off, the body is loaded onto a flat barge under armed guard, and here most stories end. The pirate has been punished. Justice is served. Roll credits. Except in Kid's case, the judges had ordered something extra, a separate writ, a second sentence layered on top of the first. It required a blacksmith with a forge. It required a barrel of pine tar heated to 200 degrees. And it required a quiet stretch of marshland east of London called Tilbury Point. Because hanging a pirate, the British had decided, was easy. Keeping him useful, that took craft. Quick pause before we get to the tar pot. I want you to think about something. Captain Kidd took 2 tries to die, 12 to 18 inches of drop, a rope that didn't break his neck, and somewhere between 15 seconds and a full minute of conscious suffocation while a London crowd cheered him on. He felt every second of it. So here's my question, and I want a real answer in the comments. If a judge slid the paperwork across the bench and made you choose, would you take the short drop at execution dock with everything I just walked you through? Or would you take what's coming in Act 2, knowing it lasts 20 years and the gulls are involved? Be honest. Drop your answer below. And if you want more of the actual forensics that the documentary channels are too squeamish to touch, hit that like button. It's the only thing that feeds the algorithm real history, instead of more pirate cosplay. Now, get the tar pot ready. The tar pot sat at the Wapping foreshore, blackened and bubbling, the way it had bubbled for every pirate before Kidd and every pirate after. Pine tar, or Stockholm tar. If the Navy was footing the bill that week, same product, slightly different distillation, both rendered down from slow-burning resinous pine wood until you had a thick black syrup that could waterproof a hull, seal a wound, or preserve a corpse. The Royal Navy went through barrels of the stuff every voyage. They knew exactly what it could do. They were about to find out what it could do to a man. But first, the paperwork. This is where everybody loses the plot on gibbeting. People think it was the default ending for any pirate. The rope, the cage, done. It wasn't. Gibbeting required a separate writ from the judge. A specific order, signed in addition to the death sentence, declaring that the body was to be hung in chains at a location of the court's choosing. Most condemned criminals got buried in quicklime under the prison yard and forgotten. The gibbet was reserved. Curated. You had to earn it. You earned it by being a pirate captain, a mutineer, a traitor, a murderer of a Royal Navy officer. Someone the Crown wanted not just dead, but advertised. Kidd qualified on at least 3 counts. The judges signed his second sentence with the same pen they signed his first. Then they sent for the blacksmith. And here is where the British Empire's commitment to bureaucratic absurdity reaches its purest form. Every gibbet cage was custom-made, hand-forged, measured to the dimensions of the specific corpse it was meant to hold. You did not have a one-size-fits-all rack waiting in some Royal Navy warehouse. Each pirate got a bespoke iron suit, tailored by a working blacksmith over an open forge, paid for out of court funds. We know what it cost, because the receipts survived. The cage for John Breads, a highwayman gibbeted at Rye in 1742, ran £2 and 5 shillings. That was more than a Royal Navy able seaman earned in a full quarter at sea. The Crown was, in real cash terms, willing to pay more to display a dead criminal than it paid a living sailor to fight the French. The structure itself was a piece of grim engineering. An iron skullcap fitted over the top of the head, sometimes with a long hook driven down through the parietal bone, the purpose being to keep the skull attached to the rest of the cage after the cervical ligaments rotted out, which they always did. Vertical iron straps ran down the back like the bars of a barrel. A horizontal band wrapped the pelvis, the midriff girdle, the blacksmiths called it, which is almost charming until you remember what it was holding in place. Wrist cuffs, ankle cuffs, locked, not buckled. A single heavy ring at the top for the chain. Once you were riveted in, you were not coming out, not in one piece. Now the corpse goes in. He's stripped first. The clothes he was hanged in get burned. Then, depending on the court's instructions, he might be redressed in coarse slop trousers and shirt, the standard Navy issue, so the public could recognize him as a sailor at 100 yards. A dressed corpse reads better from a passing ship than a naked one. The Admiralty understood branding. Then they bring the pot. Pine tar at room temperature is the consistency of cold molasses. Heated to 200 degrees, it flows like dark syrup, and it sticks to anything organic. The body is either dipped literally lowered into the pot by the hooks at the wrists and ankles, or laid on a stretcher while the workmen ladle the tar over him by hand, working it into every crease. Into the armpits, behind the knees, across the face. The hair singes off in a thin white smoke that smells like burning rope. The eyelashes go. Subcutaneous fat, just under the skin, melts and bubbles up to the surface in slow yellow blisters that pop and reseal under the next coat. The purpose is clinical. Tar is antimicrobial. It kills the surface bacteria that drive early decomposition. Tar is waterproof rain, and sea spray bead off it. Tar is a barrier to insects' blowflies can't lay eggs on what they can't pierce. And tar slowly cures in air, the way it cures on a ship's rigging, turning skin into a black leather shell that can hold a human shape for years. What tar does not do is kill the smell. It changes it. The fresh death stink gets layered under hot pine, and the two combine into something neither of them was alone. Sweet rot under burning forest. It carries half a mile on a calm day. Sailors said you could navigate to a gibbet in fog by your nose alone. Some of them weren't joking. The corpse cools. The tar sets. The blacksmith rivets him into the cage piece by piece, working from feet to head, the skullcap going on last. Then they load him onto a barge. What follows is, in the official records, called a procession. In practice, it's a parade. The barge travels by water. Admiralty business stays on Admiralty turf, flanked by Marshal's men and watched from every bridge and quay along the route. Printers have been selling broadsheet ballads about the condemned for 2 days already. 2p a sheet. Kids hang off the railings. Tavern keepers raise their prices. Somebody throws a stone, and it makes a flat, hollow thock against the tarred chest, like striking a side of cured ham. The crowd laughs because they don't know what else to do. The destination is a tall oak post, 20 to 30 feet, already prepared, already iron-sheathed at the base, so nobody can chop it down at night. Already studded with spiked iron cuffs 3 feet up so nobody can climb it. The British had thought about this. The British had thought about every way somebody might try to recover a friend's body, and they had engineered every one of those ways out of the equation. The chain goes up. The cage goes up. The cage swings. And here is where you, sailor, finally come back into the picture, because the locations were not random. Captain Kidd hung at Tilbury Point, where the Thames widens into the estuary, the last thing every ship saw leaving London, the first thing every ship saw coming in. William Fly hung at Nix's Mate, dead centre of the Boston Harbour Channel. Other gibbets stood at Hart Island and Bedloes Island in New York Harbor, at the rock once literally called Gibbet Island, near the mouth of the Hudson, at White Point in Charleston, where Stede Bonnet had met his end. Every major colonial port on the Atlantic seaboard had at least one, and they were placed exactly where you could not miss them. That was the entire point. The British weren't decorating the harbor, they were billing it. Every captain entering Boston in 1726 sailed past William Fly's cage on the way to the customs house, and when he paid his duties, somewhere in the back of his head he was paying them with the smell of Fly still in his coat. While we're swinging, let me kill another myth for you. The pirate code as some misunderstood honor system. Bartholomew Roberts Black Bart, the most successful pirate captain of the era, with more than 400 captured ships to his name, wrote articles for his crew that explicitly addressed what to do if a brother was taken and hung in chains. They knew. Every pirate signing onto every articles in every Caribbean cove knew. The cage was on the menu when they signed up. They sailed anyway. The British Empire, for its part, spent more on Captain Kidd's afterlife than on his trial. A rare instance of government generosity, all of it post-mortem. So now you have a tarred, caged, locked, hoisted, riveted, leather-skinned corpse swinging over the entrance of an American harbor. The Crown's part is done. The blacksmith has been paid. The crowd has gone home. The marshal's men have packed up. The barge is back at Wapping. You'd think the corpse's job was finished. You'd be wrong. Because the corpse's actual work, the slow, screaming, biological labor of advertising the wages of piracy to every sailor on the eastern seaboard, that work was just clocking in, and the body in the cage was about to start moving on its own. The first movement is gas. Within 6 hours of being hoisted, the bacteria that live in your gut do not know you are dead. They have not received the memo. They are still doing the work they have done your entire life, fermenting whatever was in your stomach, breaking down tissue, producing hydrogen sulfide and methane and carbon dioxide as byproducts. The difference is, when you were alive, you exhaled those gases. Now they have nowhere to go. They build pressure. The abdomen swells against the iron midriff girdle. The skin stretches taut under the tar coating. By hour 24, you can hear the tar shell creak when the wind catches the cage. By hour 48, the abdomen is straining the band hard enough that one of the rivets pops, and a watery, foamy, blood-tinged fluid, what the forensic literature politely calls purge, begins leaking from the nostrils, the mouth, the ears. It drips down the leg of the cage. It stains the gibbet post-black brown. It pools at the base. Within a week, the seabirds have learned to drink from that puddle. While the gas works from the inside, the flies work from the outside. The common blowfly Calliphora vomitoria, if you want the Latin, and you don't, but I'm telling you anyway, can locate a fresh corpse from up to a mile downwind. They arrive within 6 hours of death under normal conditions. The tar slows them. It does not stop them. They find the tear ducts. They find the lips. They find the soft tissue inside the nostrils. They lay eggs. The eggs hatch within a day. The larvae feed. By day 3, the maggot mass inside the corpse is generating its own metabolic heat. Internal temperature inside the cage runs 10 to 15 degrees above ambient. On a hot Massachusetts July, that means the inside of William Fly is running about 120 degrees. And it is, audibly, full of life. Sailors anchored downwind of Nix's mate reported a sound on still nights, a soft, continuous rustling, like silk pulled across silk, the collective movement of several million bodies, doing the only thing they knew how to do. Nobody slept on deck. The smell phases on its own schedule. First wave is ammonia and sulfur putrescine and cadaverine, the two compounds. Your brain is hardwired to find repellent because anything that smells like that has been killing your ancestors for 1 million years. Then a sweet ester note, as fats break down into smaller organic acids. Then a long final phase that lasts months. A cured, cheesy, old tar smell that becomes the permanent signature of the harbour. New Yorkers in the 1720s could tell you the prevailing wind direction without looking at a flag. Now the birds arrive. If you've ever watched a corvid work a carcass, you know they have priorities. Ravens and crows go for the eyes first. The eyes are soft. There's no bone in the way. They're sitting in open sockets behind nothing but a thin film of conjunctiva, and a raven can take both of them in under 30 seconds. After the eyes, the tongue accessible through the open mouth, which the corpse has had open since the jaw started relaxing. After the tongue, the cheeks, where the tar coat is thinnest and the muscle underneath is still soft. The bigger birds are worse. The black-backed gull, the largest gull species on the Atlantic seaboard, a 4-pound bird with a beak built for cracking shellfish, would land on top of the cage, brace its feet against the iron, reach down through the bars, and rip strips of jerky, textured, tarred flesh out of the corpse. Then it would fly off with the strip in its beak. Boston residents in the late summer of 1726 reported watching pieces of William Fly being carried over the city by seabirds for weeks. Some of those pieces landed on rooftops. Some landed on dinner tables. The crows ate well that year. What the birds left behind, the sun and the salt cured. Tar plus marine air plus repeated sun exposure plus the partial dehydration of what hadn't already drained out the bottom of the cage by month 3, what's left in the iron is no longer a body in any biological sense. It's a leathery, blackened, partial mannequin. The skull, capped in its iron skull cap, holds its position. The rib cage holds its position. The pelvis holds its position. Everything in between is jerky. The mouth has long since dropped open as the masseter ligaments failed, locking the face into what 18th century sailors called the gibbet grin. They named it because they saw it often enough to need a name. Then comes the slowest part, the disarticulation. Ligaments fail in a predictable order. Jaw first, shoulders next, then hips, then knees, then the small bones of the hands and feet. As each joint lets go, the corresponding piece falls out of the cage because remember, the cage was engineered to hold a skeleton, not flesh. The arms drop out one at a time. The legs follow. The pieces fall into whatever waits below. Marsh mud, harbour water, rocks, a tide pool. The cage retains the central mass, the rib cage, the spine, the hooked skull, and continues to swing. Captain Kidd hung at Tilbury Point from May 1701 until at least 1720, 19 years, by the conservative reading. By the end of his run, he was mostly a skull and a rib cage, and a vague suggestion of pelvis, creaking in a rusted cage in the English mist. Local children rode out at low tide and pried his finger bones out of the mud. They sold them in London taverns as souvenirs. There is a documented case of a publican advertising Captain Kidd's thumb as a curiosity above his bar. By the time Kidd had been hanging 15 years, he had become less a man and more a municipal landmark. Tour guides probably pointed him out. Now, while you're processing that, let me kill a few more myths, because the documentary industrial complex has been lying to you about this period for 60 years. Myth 1. The pirates were lovable rogues redistributing wealth from the corrupt rich. The pirates were a direct, calculable economic threat. A single successful pirate cruise in the Caribbean during the Golden Age, call it 1715 to 1722, could cost London merchants more than £100,000 in lost cargo, lost ships, and inflated insurance premiums. In modern money, tens of millions of dollars per voyage. Gibbeting was not sadism. Gibbeting was an actuarial product. Myth 2. Anne Bonny and Mary Read died in iron cages. They did not. This one will not go away no matter how many times historians correct it. Mary Read died of a fever, possibly from childbirth, in a Jamaican prison cell in April 1721. Anne Bonny's fate is genuinely unknown. Her wealthy father almost certainly brought her out of trouble. Gibbeting was overwhelmingly reserved for male pirate captains of officer rank. The Crown was misogynistic in its standard imperial way, but it did not waste blacksmiths' wages on women. Myth 3. Gibbeting was only for pirates. After the Murder Act of 1752, you could be gibbeted in Britain for landside murder too. But in the American colonies, the practice stayed almost entirely maritime. The harbour was the courtroom. The corpse was the verdict. The water was the only judge that mattered. This is also why gibbeting died. The Hanging in Chains Act of 1834 formally abolished the practice in Britain. The last gibbeted body in England was a murderer named James Cook, no relation to the captain, in 1832. In America, the practice quietly faded after the Revolution because independent harbours did not need British symbolic theatre to deter their own criminals. They had developed other methods, quicker ones, less iron-intensive. The gibbets came down, the cages went to scrap, the bones got buried or stolen or simply forgotten in the harbour mud, sinking into the silt where they remain to this day under what are now container terminals and tourist piers. But here is the uncomfortable part. A punishment designed to be seen does not really end when the body is gone. It just changes audiences. Quick check-in, 15 seconds. If you're still watching this far and most viewers are gone by now, trust me, I can see the numbers. Please click like. That's it. One tap. It tells the algorithm that real history, with the rot left in, is worth showing to the next person. We're about to enter the darkest part of the story. The part where you find out who that cage was really built for. It wasn't William Fly. The cage was never for William Fly. Fly was already dead. The rope had killed him 8 days before the tar pot ever fired up. You cannot punish a dead man. You cannot deter a corpse. The iron, the pine tar, the bespoke blacksmith's work, the 20-foot oak post with its anti-climb spikes, none of it had a single thing to do with the man inside it. It was all for you. You, the merchant captain rounding into Boston with a hold full of molasses, who had to look at it on the way to the customs house. You, the apprentice cooper in Charleston, walking past White Point with your master's lunch. You, the 11-year-old boy in New York Harbor, watching ravens lift dark strips of something off Bedloe's Island, and wondering, for the first time in your life, what the cost of a single bad choice could really be. The British Empire was not in the corpse business. The British Empire was in the behavior modification business. The corpse was just the delivery mechanism. This is the true cost of what we keep selling back to ourselves as the Wild West of the sea. Freedom, adventure, eye-patched men with parrots and chests of buried gold. The reality was a few thousand desperate, hungry, mostly young men who took a calculated bet against the most powerful navy on Earth, and a crown that had budgeted in advance the exact volume of pine tar required to convert each one of them into a billboard. The Golden Age of Piracy lasted, generously, about a decade. The gibbets that ended it stood for 100 years. And here is the cold part, the thing the British understood, and the thing nobody since has quite forgotten. You don't need the cage anymore. The cage did its job. The image is loaded now. It lives in the language. It lives in the cartoons. It lives in every Halloween costume and theme park ride and animated film about a one-eyed captain with a heart of gold. The empire is gone. The corpses are buried under container terminals and tourist piers. But the conditioning is still running, right now, in your head, while you watch this. Which brings us back to the harbour. You are on the deck of that merchantman again. 16 days out of Bristol. The sun is up. The gulls are screaming. The wind shifts. The smell hits first sweet rot under hot pine, that one specific signature you now know exactly how to identify. You look up at the cage on Nix's mate, and somewhere, in the back of your mind, a man in an iron suit smiles his gibbet grin, because he knows, 300 years later, you slowed down to look. That was always the job. If you made it this far, you survived something most viewers clicked away from 20 minutes ago. Drop the word "survived" in the comments, one word, all caps, so I know exactly which of you has the stomach for this work and which of you don't. Subscribe for the next Salty Graves episode. Same channel, same bonesaw, different graveyard. This was Salty Graves. Mind the tide on your way out.